Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Split, the young adult book review podcast for readers and writers. I'm Brian Cohen. That is Robert Scanlon, and he is trying to break a pen.
I can't let go of it.
I can't. You just can't let go.
It's the pen
You've
of never
tried.
letting go.
Ah, man.
Can you see
well, this pen of never letting go is tied into. I love how most people listen to the audio, so they can't even ever see our antics. The reason Robert has a pen of never letting go, and I don't even remember if I said, because he was so funny. Robert Scanlon writes the Dreamer Chronicles. I'm Brian Cohen. I write the Ted Saves the World series. I don't even know if I said that because you were too goofy. The Knife of Never Letting Go by Patrick Ness is a book that we're reading today. I don't know how I'd classify it. It's a fantasy colonization. I guess sci-fi. It's just basic
fantasy sci-fi chase story. Yes, I think it's more sci-fi than fantasy.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's you're right. It's quite hard to classify.
Yeah, it's and we both know that we write hard to classify stuff too. So we sympathize with Patrick Ness. This was an interesting one. I did like it. I listened to a good chunk of it while I was at a discount outlet mall outside of Chicago, and my wife was in one of the shops, and I walked around and I'm listening to this, and I got to tell you, the audio of this is fun and annoying.
Oh, really? Okay.
Because you've got Manchi.
Yes.
And it's very well done because you've got talking dogs in this book.
Yep.
You've got people reading thoughts in this book.
Yep.
And Manchi is always like, "Hey Todd, what's going on, Todd?" and so you keep having that interjected in there, and even during the but it ended up even during serious scenes, but it ended up being a very effective, I thought. So why don't we go into this? Because I'm just...
Menchi sounds like Scooby-Doo.
Yeah, basically. Todd?
Hey, dog.
Oh my
What's
gosh.
up there, Todd?
Oh, goodness. So
we better give people a description of this book because they won't.
let's talk about it because it sounds weird. It just sounds weird right now, and it is a little. But
it is.
As usual, we'll summarize, give our perspectives, and do a prompt of the week. So, are you ready?
I'm ready.
All right, let's do it. Todd Hewitt is just 1 month away from becoming a man in a world where everyone can hear each other's thoughts. The noise germ laid all thoughts bare years ago, but despite the cacophony, Todd knows the people he loves are keeping secrets. When he's forced to flee with his dog, whose thoughts also cloud his mind, he runs smack dab into the biggest secret of all. Todd must set off on a journey with a newfound friend as he seeks to learn the truth about who he is and why the members of his town seem to be stalking his every move. So, this is a weird and strange world. It really is. And I think there's a really interesting device, the creative device of telepathy. And basically everybody has it in the male persuasion, and no females have it. And for the most part, I think it worked. And occasional dog overwhelm notwithstanding, I think that it contributed to a pretty epic tale that a lot of stuff happens. It's really wide spanning, and it's definitely a what's the word I would use for it? I mean, it's ambitious. It's an ambitious story, yes. I think, that he's telling.
Yes, and definitely you can, it's a launch of a series. There's no question about that. And
sure.
The covers are all very striking and themed in that way as well. Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's a really clever device, and it's not overused to be kind of overly contrived. In a way, it's as if Patrick Ness may have watched What Women Want and thought, I wonder what it's like if it's the other way around, where women can hear all men's thoughts. Would that be a crazy world? And then he's thought, maybe that's not such a silly idea. That could be interesting to pursue.
Yeah.
Let me also say there's no sexual content in this book, but there's a huge amount of implied swearing. The word effing is used, but it's really cleverly done. There
Yeah.
is one F-bomb I seem to remember along the way, but mostly it's really violent, and there's a lot of pain experienced by the characters. I mean, these characters go through the ringer,
Yeah.
and it's pretty sad in places as well. So
Yeah.
I do think it's not for the younger reader, but it's well told and gritty, and it's relentless, like you say. The action starts well. I started reading this after, what did we finish? Monument 14.
Yes.
And I think I was probably only half an hour between finishing Monument 14 and starting this one, and the writing style really threw me because it's so different.
It is.
It's really different, and you really do
a lot of interruptions.
You get inside Todd Hewitt's head. There's lots of interruptions with all this weird noise that kind of creeps into his thoughts. It's entirely told from Todd's point of view, first person, present tense. And so it's intriguing. And it took me a few pages to get used to the writing style, just because it was really different to Monument 14, which is kind of a more standardly written book. And then once I got into that, the action just doesn't let up. It's really good. And there's lots of cliffhangers on every chapter. And it's intriguing too, because you don't quite know where the world is to start with. Or at least I didn't. I don't know if it was clear in the audiobook. I was wondering for a while. Oh, okay, they're off-world. Oh, they're settlers. Oh, I'm not. There are no spoilers here. This is all, it does become obvious pretty quickly. But he's a great character, Todd Hewitt, and the dog Manchi. I mean, he's just got to be my all-time favorite character.
That's a classic.
It's a shame in the audiobook that you've sort of got that weird voice.
No, I actually came to like that.
Okay.
I at first it got a little overwhelming.
Yes.
But then when they bonded out in the world, I feel like it was better.
Yes, yes. I just because he's a bit mean to the dog, from time to time, and he gives him I was reading.
Kicks him a bunch.
Kicks him, and then the dog says, "Ow, Todd, ow."
Oh, Todd. Oh.
Is that how he sounds? That's fantastic.
Yep.
Scooby-Doo says ow.
Yeah, but he does the narrator does a great job, especially when you get to some of the sadder scenes.
Yes.
With Manchi, conveying that emotion.
Yeah.
Because you've had this silliness kind of up to this point, it really hits harder. So I think it was well done.
Well, and the dog's not a throwaway sidekick character either. I mean, the
dog's important
to the
plot. Important to the main character. Real quick, I have a side path. So this is interesting. I was reading a review of Ted Saves the World, and it talks about how the book is very, very YA. And I was thinking, because of the just like very young YA, it said. Yes. And I was thinking, there's some pretty intense violence in this book. And it is... Does violence not matter in the age rating system? Does it really is language and sexual content really the only thing that keeps it, keeps it within a certain bound? Because, I mean, should 10-year-olds be seeing the kind of violence in this book? Is that fine? Is that cool?
I don't know the answer or an answer to that. I think we can only share opinions.
Yeah, no, of course. And this is asking an opinion.
Yeah, there have been books throughout history that have been quite either the violence has been implied, or it's been implied that the character has had some intense pain that they've experienced. Classic literary books, I think, as well, that you could say that would have had that. How explicit is it? I think would be the one thing that you'd be asking for a YA book. So you can have people go. I mean, and it's quite explicit in this book, I think.
It is it's more explicit in this book than in my books.
But the character's 12.
Yeah.
Right? So it could be mispurchased by, say, a grandparent saying, "Oh, this is good. It's about a 12-year-old boy." And gives it to a 12-year-old boy who's not maybe read so many of these kind of, this is a dark
Mm-hmm.
horror sci-fi, really in a
Yeah.
way. So it could be quite distressing. But I agree with you. I think the measure seems to be mostly sexual content and the whether the language is clean or not. If you've got neither of those, then you can definitely get away with what when I was growing up would have been something that was too violent
Yeah.
for me to read. But yeah, so it's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it's really interesting.
Whereas, like you say, your Ted Saves the World. I mean, really, you've got kissing and that's it.
Yeah.
And
The sexual content, and there's no language. So
there's no language, and there are fight scenes, but they're
there are fight scenes and people die.
But
So
they're innocuous fight scenes. Probably one of the worst things is in the first book, where one of the characters you describe how they died. I think.
Yeah.
But it's compared to this, it's a cartoon. This is gory.
No, this is some gory stuff.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a side thing, but I just wanted to.
It's important. Like I say, I think it's gritty, it's violent, it's a thrilling chase. It's not a 12-year-old boy story. This is more like I don't know. It's one of those Ender's Game
14,
type books,
15.
Where you can need to be 14 or 15 to read it, or an adult even.
Yeah.
So I think, and maybe when we come to the writers thing, we should handle. If you're an author writing something like that, it's a bit tricky. What did you think of the sort of the misspellings of for example, if he said the word plantation, then it was spelt with an AYSHUN at the end.
Well, that's the thing. Audiobook. So
I can't say to you what.
But that they played that with his accent, and they played that with ain't. They really that whole thing. So I didn't get to that part, but I think personally that makes sense given the character's lack of education. Would it be annoying? Oh yeah, I bet that would be kind of annoying.
Well, it's like it all the time, and so lots of things are misspelt in the book deliberately. And I saw some negative reviews complaining about the amount of misspellings in there. And it's like, don't you get it? This is told from Todd's point of view. It's entirely from his point of view, and that's his unreliability. And in fact, when he meets Viola, or however you're going to say her name.
I think in the audio it's Viola.
Viola, okay, that makes sense, yeah. Viola, okay. She speaks she has a completely different way of speaking style, which is fantastic. So you're still hearing it from Todd's point of view, but Viola speaks quite correctly, and in the book everything's spelled correctly when she says it, which is clever. So you really do get a good sense of how differently that is, and in fact occasionally she will correct him on something because of because let's explain this. Todd's not uneducated because he comes from a poor part of town. I mean, this is just some decision they made in this.
They burned the books.
They burned the books, basically. Yeah, they made a decision that they didn't want to be, a high-tech off-world settlers. They wanted to be back to grassroots, and so that's affected what they think about. Whether they've got things historically to relate to, and their ability to spell correctly, or to spell the way we think is correctly.
Yeah. No, I agree that is a cool device. I guess there's a book of cool, interesting devices, and just in keeping with the two different spellings, the two different characters who spell differently. I thought it was clever to bring together these kids from two different worlds. Neither of whom know everything that's going on. Even Viola is very intelligent, but she certainly doesn't understand everything about colony living just from reading about it in a book. And Todd doesn't understand society just from seeing his one part, especially a part that has been not telling him all of the truth. So I think that is an interesting way to introduce readers to a world, because you can't really understand it fully from either of the main characters' perspectives.
Yeah, and he does it really, really well, actually, quite right, unfolding just enough information that you could feel as if it's the characters themselves discovering this, because Viola has the capacity, in theory, with all of the technology on the not really giving away too much here, but the ship that she arrives on,
Mm-hmm.
would have given her a massive backgrounding on this particular planet. And yet when she gets there, knowing about something, so it's like reading about, say, something you've never done before, like cycling,
Mm-hmm.
knowing about it and doing it are completely different things. And I think you get a really good sense of that from this book. Her shock of, well, why is it like this? And what is this thing? And I can kind of hear what you're going on in your head. And
Mm-hmm.
but he can't hear what's in her head, and so she's like a blank space to him. And it is a device, but it's very cleverly used, and you do get a sense of the disconnect and the annoyance as well from Viola.
Yeah.
She really gets really annoyed with Todd.
Oh yeah.
It's great. I like
Oh, of course.
the
Of
conflict
course.
between them. But speaking of devices, what did you think about the ending?
Um, well, I talk about this in the writer's perspectives I have written down, so
Okay.
we can move to writer's perspectives if you want.
I'm going to do it from both because the reader's
Do
perspective.
it from both. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll say from uh, I think throughout the book there's great cliffhangers
Oh,
from
yeah.
chapter to
Yes.
chapter. You don't, a character kind of passes out. You don't really see what happens to them, and then you're like, oh, well, I have to keep reading, and in
Yes.
my case, I have to keep listening.
Yes.
But I think that the end one is a real. I mean, that's a humdinger. That's a monster of a cliffhanger
Yeah.
right there. And apparently, Ness is just a big fan of these. I know that I'm not always going to get to read the later books in the series, so sometimes I will flip to the end page of the last book, so to speak, and see what happens. And apparently, the final novel, and there is a short story that is set somewhat timeline afterwards with different characters,
Right.
but the final novel in the series has a huge cliffhanger.
Oh no.
The final one, the last book he plans on writing in it.
Okay.
So I mean, I think that's like his thing. That's his
Okay.
style,
All right.
which is interesting. But yeah, what did you think?
Yeah, I hate them. I think if I've invested 100,000 words in reading a book and many hours, I know it's part of a series. I purchased it knowing it's part of a series, but a series is not a serial, and this ending is a serial ending, but it's a 100,000 word episode. That's an awful lot of time to invest in something, I think, and I think most readers will not know. I didn't know what you just told me about that.
Yeah.
And I may have changed my expectations about it. And don't get me wrong, I still give this book, I give it 5 stars for the story, the writing style, the originality. I'd give it -1 for the ending. You just don't do that to people, I don't think. But obviously we
Yeah.
have a philosophical difference if he's more inclined to behave that way. I mean, you could argue, well, Tolkien did it. But it's very clearly book 1, book 2, and book 3 of a overarching book, called The Lord of the Rings.
Well, in Tolkien, Tolkien wanted it to be one book.
Yeah,
Didn't he?
That's right.
I mean, one 3,000-page book.
Yeah, but I suppose in today's ebook world, you can do whatever you like.
Yeah.
So yeah, for me, let's spell it out. There is no resolution. And it's like watching. If you didn't know Lord of the Rings and you went to watch one of Peter Jackson's movies and then it ended with "to be continued," and this happened when I went to the cinema, people were looking at each other and going, "What?" Because they'd never read the book. They didn't know that it didn't resolve. And so I think, look, I don't know, whatever. I think it lets readers down badly. I really do. And he does get clobbered for it in the reviews. For such a cliffhanger ending, that nothing resolves. When you've put the readers through the ringer with all this intense pain and violence that the characters go through. So to me, a better illustration of how to do this well is the Hunger Games trilogy. It's a modern telling of a fairly aggressively violent story where people, get killed, get hurt, but each book has a resolution. Like it or not, each book has a resolution, but the overarching story continues. And if what you're telling me about this last novel, I'll get off my soapbox in a minute. Okay, why do? But if it's his thing, okay, well, fine. I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's quite commercial, I guess. You know, you only have to look at TV serials. You know, look at Game of Thrones or something, and
Mm-hmm.
just keeps people going, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, well, hey, you got to make a living. But I've got two writers' takeaways I want to go into. My sidebar and your sidebar we're already pretty long, but
Yeah, yeah. Move it along.
my
Move it along.
two writers' perspective things I wanted to mention.
Mm.
A lot happens, but I think the pace is so quick and the telepathy device is so interesting. It seems to work that so much happens in this condensed period, and it doesn't feel like too much because things just keep moving along. And with the telepathy, I feel like you have to go all in with something like this. You really do, as a writer, and he does. You get used to it. At first, it's a bit annoying, but you've got man sheep piping in there. You've got the sheep that say sheep. You've
I
got the
am
big,
Groot.
yeah. You've got the I am Groots. There aren't any I am Groots. I don't want anyone to think there's Groots in there, but I mean, basically, you just have a lot of interesting stuff in there, and he commits so hard to the telepathy that you feel like, yeah, I buy it. This is good.
It's
I'm in.
believable, isn't it? It really is believable.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with you. And in fact, I hadn't really thought about how that would be handled in the audiobook. I loved reading it that way. It's really clever. You really get the sense that this is suddenly there's nothing, and then there's buzzing. Like a buzzing in your head, and then the thoughts start to appear, and they become closer. And they're just snippets. So this is not full blown telepathy where you're reading someone's every word of their mind. It's aptly called the noise because of that reason. It's like walking past a busy cafe and hearing snippets of conversation. That's exactly how he portrays it. It's really well done. And that must have been awkward to think about when you're writing as well, because there are so many consequences. How do you hide something? There are secrets in this book. So he's had to think that through from a writer's perspective and try and not leave any glaring plot holes. And I don't think he did. Interesting as well, this book was billed when it came out as a literary sci-fi novel. I can see why, and I think it maybe even won prizes. I actually think it's a shame that happened because the prize-winning fame drew a more widespread attention. So people perhaps who didn't know the genre. And so some of the early reviews from the time when it got the publicity were people who thought it was too violent or that the violence was gratuitous. And I didn't think that at all. I mean, I have read more violent books. The Hunger Games is as violent. And so I think if you take it as just a story, and if you're interested in this book, go and read some of the later reviews, the more up-to-date ones, and I think they're a fairly honest reflection. Because to me, it's dark, it's pacey, it's dangerous, and it's believable. And apart from the fact that I hated the ending, it was a great book, and that's he's worked hard on that, I reckon.
Yeah, no, I can imagine, and there's several short stories I think in the universe as well. So there's 3 novels and several stories, but he might be done with it. Maybe there will be a 4th novel. Who knows? But I think he was saying that it was over. So, do you have any more writers' thoughts?
Don't end a book on a cliffhanger, for God's sake. Have I said it enough? I just I couldn't bring myself to do it. It's just one of those things, it's a personal preference. Yes, I have ended every book on a hint of what trouble is stirring for the next book, because it's a series.
Yeah.
And that's what you do. You hint that there's not everything is resolved, but the main conflict that was set up on the first chapter of that book should be resolved, in my opinion, at the end of the book. And that's my opinion. I'm sticking to it, Mr. Ness.
Yeah, you tell him. I can't comment because book 3 and 4 of my series both end on cliffhangers. But
you're writing more.
Yeah,
that's true. You can still decide whether you're in the whole. Look, if the end of the whole thing is kind of like God, Stephen King did it with The Dark Tower, for goodness sake. So there's plenty of really, really good books out there that have ended with no resolution or open-ended or Yeah, so life is like that. I mean, we all end on a cliffhanger. Deep.
Well, this cliffhanger needs some takeaway.
It does. Take it
So
away.
would you rather go first or second?
I've spoken enough. I'll get off my soapbox. Go for it.
All right, my first takeaway is if you have a wild idea like telepathy, like the noise, test it out, see if it can work, and make sure you go for it 100%.
Totally. I'll take number 2. Why not have a dog as a great character? I love Manchi. Alton.
Yeah.
Ow. Alton. Ow.
Oh, Todd. Oh.
we're just going to have to do a whole episode like that.
I know. I'm sure everyone will love that.
Yeah.
I'm sure everyone will love that.
It'll be much less annoying than our normal voices.
Mm-hmm. My third takeaway is you can break all the rules when you start fresh on a new world. So be willing to try that out. I think by setting this in a new world, there weren't the constraints of society. He could play with really anything, and it gave him a lot of freedom.
I think we need a prompt.
Prompt of the week. When during your life would you have most wanted to hear other people's thoughts? Would it have been worth it if other people could hear your thoughts as well? What thoughts would you most want to hide?
Oh, no.
Yeah, some real introspective stuff here.
I don't even want to think about that in case you pick up on what I'm thinking.
Okay, fair enough. Well, Skype, allows you to read thoughts. So you can answer our prompt of the week at thesplitbookreviews.com on the episode for The Knife of Never Letting Go. 34, I think you said it was.
It is.
And you can also email us your suggestions for future books at podcast at thesplitbookreviews.com. Is that right?
That's right, yep.
Podcast at thesplitbookreviews.com. You can also leave us an iTunes review, and we'd really appreciate it because it helps us to get new listeners to find us. So leave us a review on iTunes, and we would really appreciate that. So yeah, we've got another book coming up next week. Surprise! It's called All the Bright Places by Jennifer Niven, and man, excited to talk about that one.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk about that one. And recommended by Lisa Jenkins, by the way. It was already in our queue, but it was really nice to have somebody come in with some fairly emphatic reasons as to why we should read that. And
validating us.
You'll hear about that next week. Speaking of iTunes reviews, by the way, shout out to those who have already left reviews for us on iTunes. On the US store, there are some lovely reviews there. On the UK store, there's Mark E. Cooper left a funny review, which is worth reading, complaining about how the fact that we're hitting his wallet, forcing him to buy all these books because we rave about them.
Such jerks.
So we are. And then I thought, the Australian store, there's going to be probably 100 or so.
All of Australia.
Yeah.
All of Australia.
Well, yeah, 120 then. Nothing. Please, some Antipodeans who subscribe to YouTunes. That's YouTube and iTunes together. YouTunes. I like it. I'm going to go and register that. Yes. Love an Australian review if you're up for it. If not, just leave a review anywhere you can. It definitely is the lifeblood of us podcasters.
If not, send your e-wallaby to Robert's e-wallaby account. Cool, guys. Well, this has been The Split. That's Robert Scanlon. I'm Brian Cohen. We really appreciate you listening, and come back next week for another review and commentary.
That's right. And when you hear those voices in your head this week, just make sure that not actually somebody else's.
Thank you guys for watching. Somewhere on this page is a subscribe button to the Split channel. We do reviews every week. We would love it if you followed us every single week. Isn't that right, Robert?
That's exactly right. Follow us now. Hit the subscribe button.
Do it.